Welcome back. What a cool week. So on December 21st, 2018, something mundane happened. It happens every year, but unlike every year, we were all paying attention to it. So welcome to the close of our first month of the Energy Sovereignty Project. This monthly closeout is going to take two parts. The first part is this, what I have here, where I go over the past week and we'll go over some of that interesting stuff that happened with the a little bit of driving that we were able to do. And the second that I'll release in a couple of days is a separate video where it goes through day by day, and it'll allow you to go ahead and take a look and see what the daily numbers were from the project, and we'll do that as the month as a whole. Even though we're only 1 month into the Energy Sovereignty Project, we've learned quite a bit already. Some of the things were expected and some weren't. So let's have a look at our last week for January 2019 and our first few days of driving and a few mistakes. So probably the most surprising thing to me as far as what we've learned in this first month was that we were already meeting and exceeding the home's needs. I didn't expect that. I certainly didn't expect that we'd wind up also driving a little bit on sunlight. And that's basically the name of the title for this review. So back to that December 21st date I was talking about in the opening and what that actually means. So December 21st last year was the solar minimum, that point where the sun is the lowest in the horizon, it's the shortest day. And that's really important because that to me sort of started a clock ticking. And I was very interested to find out not so much when we would meet the home's needs from the first, but when we would start meeting the home's needs from solar minimum, right? And so exactly 30 days after that date, the home met and slightly exceeded its daily production. Well, that was about 2 or 3 weeks shy of what I'd actually predicted. So that was kind of cool. And so the most important thing to take away from that is that the inverse is also true, all right? And so if we walk back 30 days back to the from the 21st of December back to the 21st of November, that's the day that our home will theoretically no longer meet its ability to match its daily needs. So if that holds true, and there isn't any reason I can think of that it wouldn't, that's basically 2 months then that that a utility company will have to deal with that gap. So that's really interesting, and it may not be exact on that date. There's some other things to take into account. You know, that's the holiday season, so people are coming over. It's colder. People are maybe using more heat. In our home, what happens is that the heater fans tend to blow, the circulating fans tend to blow a lot more than when the system is on AC. And so that, as well as Christmas lights and everything else that we mentioned, might take your home use a little higher. So maybe we'll start seeing that happen earlier in the year, not really sure. But let's save all of that from when we recap the entire month. Suffice to say that it was surprising that we met our needs so early in the year, and so that was interesting there. So this brings us to our first bit of driving on sunlight, as well as some mistakes. So let's start with this here. Let's start with what prompted us doing some driving on sunlight. So here we see January 21st. On the 21st, it was when the system reached 100% charge, and I figured, okay, well, let's go ahead and, we've got a few sunny days coming up. Let's go ahead and pop it into zombie apocalypse mode and have some fun with that. And so we did. Well, here we see the 22nd, and on the 22nd, we already had a problem. And so the problem was that though we removed 25 kilowatts from the Powerwall, we put back 17. And the home use was 23 kilowatt hours, but we produced 25. And the result was that when the system got back up to 98%, shut off the solar. Right? Oh, shoot. Okay, well, so now we have to figure out what we're going to do with that little bit of extra power. Normally it wouldn't be a problem. It would just go right back out to the grid, but we're in zombie apocalypse mode. And so because that power has no place to go, kick the system off. So my temporary solution was to flick the system back on and pump some of that power down the grid while I figured out what I was going to do. And that brings us to the 23rd. Now, the 23rd, I had to do something with the extra power. So I did a quick off-the-cuff calculation and decided to put 2 kilowatts into the car battery. And that, in theory, would keep me from topping out and having to either cut the system off or turn the system back on to grid power. So it was I was curious how far I could drive on 2 kilowatts, and so what I did was under normal driving conditions, city driving conditions, the Tesla allows you to put it in a mode where it displays power instead of miles on the car. And so all of the reserves, the battery and all of your usage doesn't show up in miles, it shows up in how many kilowatt hours you use. Very handy for what we're doing here. So I set the system to read in power mode, and then I set the system to show me my trips. And on the trip odometer, it has one trip that's reserved to show you how many kilowatt hours you've used or how many miles you've gone, in reference to the last time the car was charged, when it was taken off of charge. Again, really handy for what we're doing. And that came out to 5.6 miles. So that's pretty cool. On the 24th, well, let's pull up a couple of videos. Okay, so what we have here is a similar situation to what we had yesterday when we were looking at the difference between what went into the battery as opposed to what came out. And so let me pull it up here. So last night I took a look at the system again at midnight, and we have 14.5 kilowatts removed from the Powerwall to run the home yesterday, and we put in 19.5. So the thing to remember about that also is that includes the 2 kilowatts that we pulled out yesterday morning. All right. So our state of charge this morning was sitting at 77% right when solar started to produce. And if we were to just leave the system, then we would hit 100%, 98% is where the system seems to kick things off if you're off grid, if you're in zombie apocalypse mode. And so again, we're looking at some really easy math. You know, right around that 5 kilowatts. Again, the screenshot here, you can see that both the home use versus solar production concurs with what was put into and pulled out of the battery. So those numbers plus a weather report, the system should have the information that it needs to make its decision. And so my decision, I've put the system here back in the mode where it reads power, and so we're going to put 5 kilowatts in, and then we'll see how far we can drive on it. So, being silly, I did the same test as if it wouldn't be linear. So with 5 kilowatts in the car, I did the same real-world driving test and came to 16 miles. Pretty good. But what's important to remember about that 16 miles is it doesn't include losses from things like housekeeping. Housekeeping, for those who are new to Teslas or electric vehicles in general, when an electric car has other systems that it has on board, whether that's an onboard computer or a heater or that kinds of thing, all of that stuff's actually run off of the 12-volt battery. And so a major part of housekeeping is keeping that 12-volt battery charged using the main batteries of the vehicle. And with the Tesla, there's some other things. If you are in a very hot or very cold climate, internal cabin heating can be controlled remotely and automatically. Also, the temperature of the battery, whether you're warming up to use it the next day or trying to cool it down in the case that it's receiving a charge. Those kind of housekeeping charges can reduce the amount of overall range you have on the car if it's just left to sit. So that kind of thing. And so the mileage doesn't include charging the car and then letting it sit for a while before you drive it. But we'll do that later. We'll do some exhaustive tests on that, again, to try and keep all this real world. And so January 25th was a Friday. And remember in the opening I said that there were mistakes made? Well, this was it. The thing that was bothering me was what I alluded to before when we're talking about, keeping track of the losses and all of that, was that I wasn't plugging in the car the way that I normally do. I wasn't using the car the way that I normally use the car. And honesty is a key here. That's why all of you guys are watching this. It's why we even bothered to do any of this. It's why the test results and the tests that we choose to do are presented the way they are. And so because of all of that, I felt that I should be plugging the car in overnight. It's how I use the car. I should just normally use it. Well, there's a couple of issues with that. The biggest issue is that when I usually plug the car in at night, I'm just replacing what I use that day. I'm not projecting what I might use the following day, right? And so I'll explain a little bit more about that. So when I keep the car charged, I keep it charged about 90%. That way the batteries have some swap space to them. There's a lot of different reasons to do that for battery health in a Tesla. You never want to leave it at 100%. And so I drive during the day, and then the car is just set to automatically return to that 90% state. And then I simply plug it in at the end of the day, and it replenishes out, and then it stops charging, but it doesn't really stop charging. Back to the housekeeping stuff. So once it reaches that 90%, it takes a hit every once in a while off of the charging system to maintain losses that are created by those housekeeping events, whether it's warming or cooling the cabin, warming or cooling the battery, or topping up the 12-volt battery that's in the car. And so that way, when you go back out to the car in the morning, whoop, there it is at 90%. Well, this time of year, the system just isn't really ready to do that yet. I'm barely keeping up with the home. I'll talk more about that in a second. And so we're just not there yet. I'm still in a very predictive mode where I'm having to look at the weather report to decide whether, how much driving I'm going to do the next day, how much charge I'm going to put in the car. So that led to the mistake. And so I was trying to be cute and remain disconnected from the grid, keeping it in zombie apocalypse mode. And so, like I mentioned, it was Friday, so I came to the decision that I need to start driving the car more normally. So I put another 5 kilowatts into the car, which I probably shouldn't have done. That was a little bit more than what I needed, and that depleted my percentage that was available at the beginning of the solar charge the next day. I'll talk about that in a second. And I didn't just drive it to deplete that 5 kilowatts. That was silly. Left some in the car, and I just normally drove, and I did about 5 miles that day. And so here's from January 25th. Let you take a look at that for a second. And so, what was the mistake? Well, the mistake was setting the car to trickle charge in the evening. Well, usually when, you know, I visit friends overnight or whatever, you know, I'll ask them if they have a standard house plug to plug in. Now the idea there isn't that I'm going to be putting a whole bunch of charge on the car. The idea is just so that I don't lose charge overnight. If the temperature drops, or just from those housekeeping events that are going on, I could be able to keep the car at at the amount of charge that I drove in, maybe add a few miles, right? But that's 110 volts. Without thinking about it, I set the rate of charge to its minimum on the car, which was 5 amps. And I let it charge overnight. Well, I'm on a 240 volt system. That particular, it's a high voltage charger. And that is 1.2 kilowatts for 8 hours, 10 hours. By morning I had just over 10 kilowatt hours in the battery, and the battery in the car was still below 50%. Back to that whole thing, I was trying to be cute, drive on sunlight, deplete the car, put some stuff in. So when I first started putting solar into the car, I was thinking, oh, I'm just going to be able to continue this on and keep driving. Well, that didn't turn out to be the case. So because I was below that 50% minimum that I could set to charge, it kept trying to put charge in the car. And because it wasn't going to reach the 50%, it never hit that point. So what happened? Well, on Saturday morning, I looked at how much it was already in there. I thought, oh, I'm going to be driving tonight. It's the weekend. We're going to go out with friends and meet some friends in Sacramento. So that's about a little less than 20 miles there and back. So what the hell? I'll put 15 kilowatt hours into the car. And so I had it stop at even 15. And here's for January 26th. And so so I did. Well, the decision to do that was based on the weather report at the time, which showed mostly sunny with rain starting on Thursday. So I had those 3 days to replenish those losses. No problem. All right, I had 3 days to make up for it. Well, it's January, and the weather is changeable. And the weather report turned from mostly sunny till Thursday to this. So while it is true that I got 37 miles of driving that day, it came at a cost. And the solar day percentage on the 26th, bring that up here, here's the 26th. So the total solar day percentage on the 26th was 50%. Total solar day on the 27th here was 51%. So I had regained what I'd lost, but I wasn't gaining on it. And so the total solar day on the 28th, here, pull that up, is 46%. And as I compile this information for release today, we're sitting at roughly 29%. We'll probably peak out somewhere around 32 to 35. And unfortunately that means because I tried to include driving in this past week a bit too early, we're probably going to have to switch back to grid power at some point over the next 3 or 4 days during these storms. So that's unfortunate. Kind of get past that rainy patch. But it was still a really fun experiment. And I think we learned quite a bit on there. We were able to drive 80.6 miles this week just on sunlight. So that's kind of cool. Last time I checked, the number of miles that you're able to drive on sunlight by any ICE vehicle was 0. So, but it was just a bit too early to sustainably do so, and so we'll have to give that maybe another couple of weeks, but we'll see. But it shows pretty clearly that we need to have a little more control over how the vehicles get their charge, a little more integration between the vehicle and the system, and more ways to set the vehicle to charge to certain levels or at certain rates. Charging from grid power to allow a system like Tesla's Gateway to discriminate where the power goes would be really cool, so that in the case of, for the time being, where they still don't allow you to charge off of the grid, it would be nice to allocate power to come from the grid to at least charge the car. So at least that wasn't an additional load that you were trying to put on the whole system. Again, we're talking about this time of year. In a couple of another 3-4 weeks, this is going to be a complete non-issue. So these are the kinds of things that are going to make that end of year, when we close out the project for the year, some of the conclusions that we're going to be able to make here are going to be pretty powerful, and they're going to be solid, backed up by all of this data. I'm not too concerned about the mistakes that we make. We're going to learn a lot more from our mistakes than we ever are from our successes. That's just engineering. And so with that, thanks for watching. I'll follow this up in a couple of days when we close out our month, and then we'll be able to start fresh for February, which will be really interesting. Well, I'm sure that at some point in February we'll actually wind up hitting that point where making the home numbers is a no-brainer. So thanks for watching. It's free to, as always, feel free to like and subscribe if this is the kind of thing that you're interested in. We keep bringing these to you, and if this is the first video that you stumbled on, go ahead and watch some of the other videos, see what happened to bring us up to this point. And good luck with your own systems, and we'll see you next month.